The evolution of U.S. presidential inaugurations. Every 4 years, a momentous occasion takes place in Washington, D.C. It's a tradition as old as the United States itself, Inauguration Day, a day when a new president is sworn into office, marking a fresh chapter in American history. But how did this tradition begin? And why is it so significant? Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating history of U.S. presidential inaugurations, from George Washington to the present day. So buckle up. It's going to be an exciting ride. It all started in 1789 with none other than George Washington, the first president of the United States. Now imagine this. The country had just won its independence. There was no rule book for how to run a new nation, no manual on presidential traditions. So on April 30th, 1789, Washington took the oath of office on the balcony of Federal Hall in New York City, the temporary capital at the time. But here's the twist. He didn't have a grand script for the speech. It wasn't like today's polished, teleprompter-fed speeches. Washington simply spoke from the heart, and the very first inauguration of the United States began. Did you know Washington's famous words, "So help me God," were not originally part of the official oath? It's said that he added them in a moment of personal reflection, an iconic moment that continues to this day. As time went on, the inauguration ceremonies evolved. By the 19th century, the event became more ceremonial, though still far from the spectacle we see today. Think about Andrew Jackson's inauguration in 1829. It was wild. Thousands of people flooded the streets of Washington, and it was less about the formalities and more about the people. In fact, things got so rowdy at Jackson's inaugural party that the White House had to be cleared out by the military. Talk about a raucous celebration! Imagine the chaos. People climbing in through windows, breaking china, and even knocking over furniture. It's safe to say the presidential inauguration wasn't quite the refined event we know today. Then, we enter the 20th century, a time when the inauguration started to reflect the grandeur and media presence we now associate with the event. In 1901, Theodore Roosevelt became the youngest president in U.S. history after the assassination of William McKinley. His inauguration was notable because he took the oath of office on the porch of the Ansley Wilcox House in Buffalo, New York, after McKinley's untimely death. Roosevelt's swearing in was informal, but packed with emotion. He was stepping into an immense role during a time of change. And then there's Franklin D. Roosevelt, who took office in the midst of the Great Depression. His inaugural speech in 1933 delivered a message that resonated with the nation's struggles. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. It was a moment of hope in a time of despair, and Roosevelt's 4 terms forever changed the way presidents addressed the country during their inaugurations. By the 1960s, technology changed the inauguration game entirely. With the advent of television, millions could now tune in to watch the ceremonies live. John F. Kennedy's inauguration in 1961 became one of the most memorable in history. His call to action, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," inspired an entire generation. His elegant, youthful presence brought a sense of hope and renewal to the nation. Can you imagine what it must have been like for Americans, sitting around their black and white TVs, watching history unfold before their eyes? The power of television really brought the country closer to the moment. Fast forward to today, and we're now accustomed to a highly polished, media-saturated event. The 21st century has brought us the age of live streams, Twitter hashtags, and viral moments. Barack Obama's 2009 inauguration was historic, not only because he became the first African-American president, but because it was a moment of deep significance for many Americans. His inauguration was watched by over 1 million people in person and millions more on TV and online. That moment, January 20th, 2009, was a watershed for the country, symbolizing progress and change, and it set the stage for inaugurations that are both political milestones and media spectacles. Since then, every inauguration has its own unique atmosphere, often reflecting the political climate of the time. Whether it's the divide during Donald Trump's 2017 ceremony, or the solemn, socially distanced inauguration of Joe Biden in 2021 due to the pandemic, each event tells its own story about the nation's state of mind and what's to come. So, what's next? Will we see virtual inaugurations? More social media-driven events? Or perhaps, as technology evolves, we'll have an entirely new way of celebrating the transition of power. Whatever the future holds, one thing remains certain. Inauguration Day is one of the most important days in the American political calendar, symbolizing the peaceful transfer of power, democracy at work, and the promise of a new chapter. From George Washington's humble beginning to today's star-studded events, presidential inaugurations have evolved with the times. But at their core, they remain a celebration of the American democratic experiment, a reminder that in this great nation, the people hold the power. And every 4 years, the transition is made with solemnity and pride. All right, that's all for today's video. I hope you found it interesting and learned something new. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel grow.